Hi, this is Shadman, and welcome to my digital learning synthesis. Throughout my learning in digital context and education, I have learned that digital learning is not defined by the amount of technology in a class, but by the pedagogical decisions that teachers make. This digital learning synthesis explores four concepts that inspired me. The first is pedagogy, which means to give students the autonomy and choices they need to direct their own learning. The second is ludic pedagogy, which is to foster student engagement in the classroom by using fun, play, playfulness, and positivity. The third is digital degrowth, which means using technology with purpose and sustainability. And the fourth is cognitive load theory, which means designing learning experiences that maximize understanding. Ultimately, my synthesis seeks to explain that technology should support pedagogy, not replace it. In their article "Pedagogy and Digital Media Networks: Setting Students on the Path to Lifelong Learning", Lisa Mary Blaschke and Stuart Hayes define pedagogy as the study of self-determined learning. The central aspect of pedagogy is the learner's agency and their ability to choose their own pathway to learning. Carl Rogers, a humanist, found that human beings have a natural propensity to learn, and he encouraged placing the learner at the center of the education process, even if it means eliminating grades, credits, examinations, and even teachers. Over here on the right, I have a picture of three different glasses. The glass on the very left has the least water, and it's titled Pedagogy. The glass in the middle, which is titled Andragogy, has some water, and the glass on the right, which is titled Hudagogy, has the most water. The level of water represents the level of autonomy learners have. Among the three learning theories, pedagogy, andragogy, and eudagogy provides learners with the most autonomy, which is why on the glass on the right there is the most water. Pedagogy allows the learner to control both the learning and the assessment. In contrast, pedagogy provides the least autonomy as the teacher controls both learning and assessment. That is why the glass on the left has the least water. Andragogy provides some autonomy. The student may control the learning, but the teacher controls the assessment. That is why the glass in the middle has some water. Why does pedagogy matter in education? Pedagogy promotes learner agency, builds self-efficacy, and encourages lifelong learning. It was Bandura who said that the human mind is generative, creative, proactive, and reflective, not just reactive. Pedagogy encourages innovation, creativity, and reflection, which are all traits that are necessary for lifelong learning. During my first placement, the grade 7-8 students I taught completed a unit on LEGO robotics, fulfilling the coding strand of the grade 7 and 8 math curriculum. Rather than teach the students everything they needed to know about LEGO robotics, my ET played the role of a facilitator by asking students guiding questions that got them interested about various codes. These These questions inspire the students to learn the program using their own autonomy and choices. They have done this by successfully designing their own unique robots, deciding as groups of 3 and 4 which missions they wanted to complete, and using trial and error to troubleshoot whenever a code did not work correctly. In short, the students demonstrated pedagogy. Following my ET's example, teachers should ensure to carefully scaffold a lesson, such as ask guiding questions and apply gradual release of responsibility before allowing students to complete tasks independently. While autonomy is a notable strength of pedagogy, too much autonomy can overwhelm students, and that is why teacher-led scaffolding is so important. As shown in this picture, using trial and error and lots of curiosity, this student group programmed their Lego robot to run only on green tape. The black construction sheet in the bottom of this picture was used to ensure that the Lego robot would avoid running over materials of other colors. In their chapter "Ludic Pedagogy Online: Fun, Play, Playfulness, and Positivity", Sharon Lauricella and T. Keith Edmonds define ludic pedagogy as a learning theory that involves incorporating fun, play, playfulness, and positivity into learning. While many believe that play takes away from learning, it actually increases student engagement and motivation towards learning. Students learn best when playful experiences are connected to meaningful learning goals. Why does ludic pedagogy matter in education? Ludic pedagogy helps students in a classroom to build connections with one another, thereby develop soft skills that are necessary to succeed in one's career. Ludic pedagogy promotes creativity, which is necessary for lifelong learning. Ludic pedagogy encourages participation, thereby helping students to take accountability for their learning. Altogether, students are more willing to ask questions, make mistakes, and collaborate. Over here, I have two pictures. Um, the one on the left reads as follows. Activity Four Corners. You will hear a statement about culture, identity, or colonization. Decide how much you agree or disagree with it. Strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. Move to the corner of the room that matches your opinion. The picture on the right presents a prompt, specifically prompt 4, and it reads as follows. People from outside a culture can accurately tell stories about that culture. I will be talking about ludic pedagogy in this game of Four Corners. In my second placement, I taught students using grade 12 university preparation English. Students taking grade 12 university preparation English post-colonial literary theory by playing a game of Four Corners with them. Rather than memorizing definitions of hybridity and double consciousness, students applied these concepts to various prompts. This activity was intended as a diagnostic assessment as I taught the students explicit definitions, such as the definition of double consciousness after the activity was over. The Four Corners activity incorporated movement, choice, discussion, collaboration, and reflection, which are all principles of ludic pedagogy. At the same time, the activity engaged students in higher order thinking about complex issues and post-colonial literary theory. To ensure that fun, play, playfulness, and positivity enrich the student learning experience, teachers should always ensure that play is connected to intended learning outcomes and success criteria, in addition to being inclusive and accessible. Through play, students were able to form connections between theory and real-world issues and listen to multiple perspectives. The next concept I want to talk about is digital degrowth. As the name suggests, digital degrowth challenges the assumption that the more technology there is, the more enhanced a learning experience is. Instead, digital degrowth encourages teachers to think about the most sustainable way of teaching concepts and theories. More technology is not always the answer. As mentioned by Neil Selwyn in his article Digital Degrowth Toward Radically Sustainable Education Technology, digital degrowth emphasizes simplicity, sustainability, and progressive social change. The goal is not to reject technology, but to reassess how we use it. Why does digital degrowth matter in education? Currently, educational technology is causing harmful environmental impacts through energy-intensive data storage and e-waste. Digital degrowth reminds us that educational technology should be focused on progressive social change and social justice rather than the efficiency of company products. Digital degrowth seeks to reduce technology use to essential learning needs to preserve the planet's ecosystems. One recommendation is to use permacomputing, which is to extend permaculture approaches into digital domains, thereby encouraging principles of reuse, repair, maintenance, non-waste, dramatic decreases in the use of artificial energy. A more direct recommendation is to establish a repair cafe, that is, a device sharing library within a school to reuse and maintain existing hardware rather than investing in new hardware. Over here in this slide, I have two pictures. The one on the left reads as follows: Four Corners activity, themes in um, Indian horse. Sorry about the typo. It's not supposed to be indigenous, it's supposed to be Indian. I will fix that soon. Um, the instructions read as follows. I will read a statement aloud and we'll show it on the slides. You will move to the corner of the classroom that best reflects your opinion on the statement, indicating whether you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree with it. The picture on the right reads as follows. Identity. Your identity is shaped more by your community and culture than by your personal choices. Do you strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree? And I will be talking about digital degrowth in this game of Four Corners. In a learning environment in which Chromebook presence has become a norm in classrooms, sometimes it feels great to close those Chromebooks and just have an open discussion open discussion about a topic or play a game of four corners to think about important topics like identity in Richard Wagamese' novel Indian Horse. I could have asked these questions using a Menti poll, but would students have engaged in a conversation? Probably not as much as they would in a game of four corners. Having conversations while moving around the room is a great way to practice deep reflection. Moreover, my approach demonstrates frugal computing, which, as mentioned by Selwyn, is the idea of treating computing resources as precious and finite only to be used when necessary and in the most efficient ways possible. While teachers should always be considering the learning outcome and success criteria of a lesson, they should also be considering whether technology used for particular lessons really enhance the learning experience or whether they take away from it. The final concept I want to talk about is cognitive load theory. In his article, 30 Years of Research on Online Learning, Richard E. Meyer talks about cognitive load theory, a learning theory explaining that the total cognitive load experienced by a learner consists of three demands on cognitive capacity during learning: extraneous, intrinsic, and germane cognitive loads. Extraneous cognitive load refers to cognitive processing that is not relevant to learning goals and outcomes and is caused by the way material is presented. An example of this would be cluttered presentation slides. Intrinsic cognitive load refers to cognitive processing needed to achieve a learning goal and depends on the complexity of the material that is studied to achieve the learning goal. Germane cognitive load refers to cognitive processing caused by the learner's efforts to understand learning material. Why does cognitive load theory matter in education? By understanding cognitive load theory, teachers can ensure that students do not encounter cognitive overload and frustration. Teachers can also ensure that students are processing information effectively, both within their working memory and their long-term memory. They can do this by applying what I like to call the three M's. First, teachers can minimize extraneous load. Teachers can remove unnecessary information from their slides, information that they can instead discuss with students verbally, and also add more pictures. Teachers can manage intrinsic load. They can scaffold learning for students by breaking down complex topics into more understandable segments so students do not become overwhelmed with information. Teachers can also maximize German Teachers can maximize germane load. They can show students mind maps and flowcharts so they can retain their information better and form connections between their learning in one area of study to their learning in another area of study. Over here, I have a slide that I taught to a grade 10 academic English class. This was before we started our unit on Richard Wagamese's novel Indian Horse. I wanted to begin the unit by talking about important themes that students will encounter throughout the unit as they read through Indian Horse. In my slides, I like to include a picture which takes up about half of the slide space, if not at least 1/3 of it. So over here, I have a picture of a word wall. The picture should relate to the topic of the slide. I like to make my titles large and easy to read. Generally, I like to use a font size of 50. So over here, the title says Theme 5, Resilience and Hope, Never Giving Up. So I identified resilience as one of the themes in the novel, and I briefly described it as the idea of never giving up, so students who do not know the definition of resilience can infer that it means to never give up. I ensure to apply an appropriate color contrast all throughout my slide, especially when sharing bullet points and body text. Appropriate color contrast ensures that slide text is easy to read and a slide is visually appealing. In this case, I used white text over black background. I separated my ideas into bullet points so students can follow through with the ideas very easily as I explain them. And lastly, I ensure that the body text that I use in my slides is large enough to be read from the back of the classroom. Generally, I like to use a font size of 24 for my body text. In this lesson, I introduced students to themes in Richard Wagamese's novel Indian Horse. In the slide, I minimized extraneous cognitive load by using concise bullet points. I did not share any quotes on the same slide because I plan to read them aloud and verbally discuss them with the students. By doing this, I also ensured that students were actually listening to my lesson and not just copying down information from my slides. After exploring the four concepts, pedagogy, ludic pedagogy, digital degrowth, and cognitive load theory, I have learned that digital teaching is not about finding the newest technology, but about making pedagogical decisions that enrich student learning. As a future educator, I will strive to provide students with meaningful choices that align with desired learning outcomes and encourage learner agency. I will create engaging learning experiences for my students by teaching lessons through fun, play, playfulness, and positivity. I will use technology with the intention of supporting effective student learning and recognize that more technology does not always produce better learning. I will design lessons, activities, and assignments that reduce unnecessary cognitive demands so students can focus on understanding concepts and ideas rather than becoming overwhelmed. In conclusion, digital tools can really enhance student learning. However, teachers should consistently exercise professional judgment by ensuring that digital technology does not replace human connection, curiosity, and critical thinking, because just like digital technology, these are elements that are essential to lifelong learning and success. Thank you for listening to my presentation.